Good morning. Welcome to Martalks. This is Daryl Rosenstein. I'm your host. We're going to be speaking today with Jay McBain of Canalys, an analyst within the channel community now for over 20 years. Actually, Jay founded two successful channel solutions vendors, and we're going to be discussing today the role of channel within the headless ecosystem, as it is a rapidly changing landscape, and obviously Jay is an authority in the area. Thanks for joining us today, Jay.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Well, I wanted to start out with first off, in one of your podcasts, you came across a term that I think best encapsulates the marketplace that we're in today, the age of the ecosystem. And I'd like you to unpack that a bit for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I said the decade of the ecosystem, and I look at, and I've been around almost 3 decades in this industry. But if you go back to, for example, 1999, we kind of kicked off the decade of sales, the kickoff of Salesforce.com. I was carrying a bag back in those days, and you went from managing your territory with your gut. You went from thinking you were born to be a salesperson to the science of sales. And 2 years later, you couldn't get a job anywhere in sales, up or down the line, without deep CRM and sales tech skills on top of it. The next decade, about 10 years later, you have the decade of marketing. Small little companies at that time named Eloqua and Marketo and HubSpot and Pardot and Acton. Today, a couple of weeks ago, you have the Martech stack at 9,932 logos on it. And so in the decade of marketing, these small companies, the big three were acquired by Fortune companies. The fourth place company that didn't get acquired became worth $47 billion. That's HubSpot. And just created all kinds of value, to the point where the head of marketing in many companies spent more money on technology than the CIO. And so this just created an incredible environment for digital agencies, hundreds of thousands of companies that now 78% of them are technology companies. And while they still do creative and concierge and all the wonderful work they do, they're literally doing integrations, implementations. They're deep into e-commerce. I mean, this is a world-changing event, where 10 years later now, we're in this decade of the ecosystem. And we know that in world trade last year, $94 trillion of world trade, 75% of it went indirectly. So that's how money changes hands. You bought your last car from a dealer. You bought your last TV from a retailer. You bought your last jar of peanut butter from a grocer. Almost everything you do is indirect. Even if you bought a computer from Dell in the 90s, Dell just reported a few weeks ago, $104 billion in revenue, and 58% of it is now indirect. So we're living in an indirect world. And the average customer, the average B2B customer, for example, has 7 different partners in the scope. So when you're talking about headless, when you're talking about e-commerce, when you're talking about marketplaces, when you're talking about how all this comes together, you're literally dealing with 7 different companies helping the customer along. And the point of sale is actually becoming less important as compared to how the customer gets to the dance. And in many cases now, 76% of companies are going to a subscription consumption model. So that initial point of sale, that initial e-commerce transaction, is just the first 30 days with that client. And now every 30 days forever, you've got a customer for life, or at least you need to get a customer for life. And how partnerships intersect with e-commerce is becoming the story of the decade of the ecosystem.
Outstanding. I'm looking at the headless market, and I'm talking specifically about microservice architectures and storefronts that are built upon microservices. You have the monoliths that pioneered the space, that are providing all functionalities. And now, with the advent of API first technologies, essentially store owners can build out the store of their dreams that best reflects their brand image. And that necessitates adopting a few more technologies at the outset, 5 or 6 versus 1. And that interplay between those vendors and the agency is more complex as a result. Um, I'm interested in your thoughts about how that go to market is different for those parties than historically it had been with the monoliths.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is your software as one of those layers, those 5 or 6 layers that you mentioned, might get acquired through a marketplace
Hmm.
in the first place.
Hmm.
So in the true kind of meta environment that we're in here, your own go-to-market involves marketplaces as well. You might get acquired along with the 5 other companies on an AWS or a Microsoft or a Google marketplace. You might get acquired on an IBM, SAP, or Oracle marketplace. You
Hmm.
could get acquired on a Salesforce, HubSpot, as we mentioned, Marketo, ServiceNow, Workday type of marketplace. So we're seeing in the world of marketplaces, for example, we have obviously the very large, more consumer facing Amazon and Alibaba's of the world. They both have, Amazon for business and Alibaba for business.
Hmm.
But you get into the core part of go to market, and there are about 20 what I call super marketplaces that will lead about 80% of that. Behind that, you've now got, we're in a market now after a few years where there's no argument for building your own e-commerce, for building your own marketplace, for architecting your own 5 or 6 layers. You don't want to be in the development business, the programming business, as these companies now are raising hundreds of millions of dollars, hiring thousands of engineers and programmers and data scientists and stuff. Just like the decade of sales, decade of marketing, there's no chance now that you could architect and build from scratch and design your own e-commerce environment to make that the marketplace of the dreams or e-commerce experience of your customers' dreams. You're now in buy mode. And where you buy that is getting very interesting. We're watching 150 marketplace development firms, which all have an e-commerce component or multi-component. And now in the last 6 months, we're starting to see, like in previous decades, the top ones start to distance themselves, the top 5 in every SaaS category. So companies like AppDirect are raising hundreds of millions of dollars to be that marketplace of choice that you could build the Lego bricks on.
Hmm.
You could choose any e-commerce, you can choose any other, technology to pair with that, but that company is getting to the point where they're owning a lot of these niche marketplaces. You've got a company like Miracle with a K in Europe
Hmm.
who just raised $555 million, which is, a lot of money to separate themselves from the pack, to build out the developers, to do the mergers and acquisitions up the stack, to build themselves as a credible front player. You've got like a Cloud Blue that was put together by Ingram with a bunch of acquisitions that can play that role, but coming out of a traditional distribution. You've got a small company in Saskatoon, Canada, like Vendasta, just put together $120 million of investment, and they're building themselves out. So out of 150 companies, we're starting to see, 5 of them start to separate themselves from the pack and take on, when you said 5 or 6 companies, somebody takes on that foundational layer
Hmm.
of how you build an environment for your customer, the dream environment for your store.
Hmm.
And if you're out of the consumer space, you've obviously got Shopify's and everyone else building, but it's an exciting market.
It's an amazing market. It's the most dynamic I've seen in 25 years now of working with e-commerce startups. And I guess the heart of the matter that I see is when you're an early stage vendor in one of the third party categories like composable front end, or building the user interface for a store, or in the optimization or personalization layer, or providing search, or providing product information management. You're part of a deal at an earlier stage with a headless platform as the base, an Elastic Path, a Commerce Tools, a Spryker. And necessarily, there is a higher level of collaboration required there. How might an early stage firm that is in this market where you're talking about these gigantic marketplaces coming online better leverage their channel relationships in order to gain a foothold in the market.
Yeah, so it's almost a go-to-market question, and back to routes to market. Over
Yeah.
my shoulder, I've got a Venn diagram of all the different components that go into the answer. But to say it very simply, I'll turn it back around to the buyer. As that e-commerce company, you're trying to sell your product. You're trying to sell it with others. We know 5 or 6 other layers to the stack. We know that customer has 7 partners who are adding some sort of value in some way or another. But here it is. Here's kind of the 3-part strategy. One is your customer, we know behaviorally, psychologically, are going to go through 28 moments before they make a vendor selection, either for you or for one of your competitors. So they're going to put together their stack. They're going to put together that 5 or 6 layers. They're going to come to that point of purchase after 28 separate moments. And just like when we buy a car and do any considered purchase, we're going to be out, reading ebooks. We're going to go on social media. We're going to talk to our neighbors and friends. We're going to watch YouTube videos. I mean, we're going to do everything we can to become an empowered buyer. And how you intersect your customer at those early moments is critical. You don't have cookies anymore, so Google or Facebook aren't going to sell you the data of where your customer is before you see them. So who owns that ebook? Who owns that peer group? Who owns the association? There's 14 spheres of influence that they go through those 28 moments. You need to design, and you should have a list on your wall, not only of the logos, the people and the companies that are highly influential to your targeted customer based on the buyer type, the industry they're in, the geography they're in, the sector segment they're in, the product areas they're looking at, those 5 or 6 layers, as well as a delivery model, whether they're looking at a managed model, somebody just to come in and do everything for them, or they're going to do everything themselves. But you got to consider those 6 things. You got to consider all these 28 moments. And if you can do that and look at all the spheres of influence, or at least find 10 or 15 of those 28 and figure out a way to partner up in those cases. These aren't resellers of your product. They're probably a very low chance of them ever transacting and collecting money on your behalf, but they're highly influential and you should treat them as partners. So understanding from your customer side in those 28 moments is step number 1. You can define all the logos, you can define the people, you can actually do all the work. Like a $10 an hour intern could do all the work for you to get that on one page. The second step to that is double clicking on every one of those logos. I want to know the people. I've got an e-commerce tool in any of the categories that you just mentioned. I want to know the top 100 people who are literally writing those ebooks, recording the podcasts, who are running on the board of that association, doing that speech in Vegas. They're doing these 28 moments that are making your customer smart. And if they could somehow, if you knew who those people were and they knew enough about you to be dangerous, and if some of them offhanded on stage or maybe in the hotel lobby bar would drop your name in a positive way, unprovoked, that endorsement could be everything. But most companies, by the way, haven't done the basic blocking and tackling. They don't understand those 28 moments. They don't understand all the logos and spheres that they come through, and they don't understand the top 100 people literally influencing their customers before the point of sale. That's step 1. At the point of sale, you got to make sure that you're in those places that provide a frictionless environment for your customer. So you want to make sure how they want to buy. If they want to buy direct from you, if they want to buy through a marketplace along with the 5 or 6 other things, and be able to procure and provision your product along with others. Or if they want to buy through Larry in the white van, buy through some sort of reseller, buy through a digital agency, buy through a system integrator, buy through another ISV. You've got to make sure that at that point of sale, you've got customers that have all kinds of behaviors and ways that they like to spend money. And you've got to make sure you have a program that supports and doesn't create a point of friction for them at that point of initial sale. And then the third stage is really now in a subscription consumption model, every 30 days forever. I got to drive adoption of my product, my layer, my 5 or 6 layers. If I'm not literally used every day, if I'm a nice to have versus a need to have, I'm not going to renew that client forever. So the second thing is I want to get deeper integrations. I want to get deep into the ERP system like SAP. So whether they like us or not, they're not going to pull us out. I want to get sticky. when you think of consumer behavior, I want to get habit forming, kind of like that Netflix thing where, you look at that $15 thing on your bill every month and you're like, yeah, I guess we're going to renew another month because, we're watching it. And then, in the end, you need a channel. Your average customer has 7 partners. So those partners, if they're upselling and cross-selling and selling new innovation that you're putting into the market or selling bigger part of your portfolio, that's not the only product you have is the one they bought. So you're trying to enrich the contract and get to 108% retention over time. It's all a partnership play. Getting the customer to the dance, getting them on the dance floor, and then keeping them dancing all night long is literally your go-to-market strategy. And rolling up your sleeves and getting very tactical, names, faces, and places is what separates the winners from the losers.
Well, when I look at the go to market for most early stage firms, it's obviously direct. They're going direct to the buyer. They're going direct to the chief digital officer and the CEO for the brand, either B2B or B2C, that they're looking to provide their solution to, and they're totally focused on that end user, that end consumer, in their go to market. They're not typically in the early stages really building out their channel relationships. And well, I certainly have seen some founders that are remarkably prescient, and they've done that to an incredible extent. I think of Patrick Friday at View Storefront, that in his first year, I think he had 5 dozen partners within digital agencies, within e-commerce platform, within personalization, that we're all driving towards adopting their composable front end solution, which is magnificent. But most founders don't have time to do that. So, in terms of prioritization, what would you recommend that founders do in terms of putting those top 100 people on the wall? Or does it behoove them to adopt a channel partner solution uh, immediately alongside their Martech stack that they're going to be using to go after their either the IRC 500 or the mid market or whomever for their customers with their Salesforce automation package?
Yeah, so I'll remind everyone for 40 years in the tech industry that the inventor of the technology or the early stage innovator has rarely, if ever, won the market. It never happens. None of the trillion-dollar companies today ever invented the things that they brought to market. Where do they win? We all know that it's go to market. We know it's sales and marketing. We always say, oh, well, they're not a great innovative company, but oh boy, are they great marketers. And I worked for IBM for 17 years. And so understanding that nuance is important. And so early stage, when I don't have time, I'll put that in air quotes, that's all your time. You have to build a product and get to product fit and get to a minimum viable product that solves a problem. Yes. Am I going to try to hit a home run on my product and make it literally the mousetrap that you can replace all 5 or 6 layers with mine? The answer is no. The fact of the matter is you should be working just as hard on your product as you are in your go-to-market. The problem is the channel for 40 years has been synonymous with the point of sale of your product. And like a McDonald's, if you've ever watched the movie The Founder, they spent more time in the movie perfecting the kitchen and bringing the fry-later, an inch closer to the hamburger machine and everything else. And when they got to the product fit in that one restaurant, then it wasn't the founder, it was somebody new that came in with a franchise model. Once we've got this working in the 25-cent hamburger or whatever it was, we need to put a restaurant on every street corner. So that was always the channel strategy, which is a franchise strategy. And yes, no startup should be thinking about bringing on resellers until you get product fit, until you get marketing fit and everything else. So it's always a conversation for later. But what's changed in the decade of the ecosystem is there's 7 partners and 6 or 7 of them are non-transactional. They're not looking to ever be a reseller of yours, but they're making money with your client or your prospective client by doing other things. And it behooves you to go find out who those 7 people are when you're writing your original business plan. to understand who those 100 super connectors. I tell private equity folks and VC folks, if the founder hasn't come to that conclusion and know the names and faces and places in the industry, they're not going to be a winning company, no matter how good their technology is. So that's day one now. It's not creating the restaurants of the future and trying to put a coffee shop or a donut shop on every street corner of the world. We're not talking resell anymore. We're literally talking about the 7 people who are the most influential across those 3 stages. And once you get them saying nice things about you, you've got a chance to layer in and innovate inside a customer. And by the way, have the customer fund your future development, which is a better way than having outside investors rip up your cap table while you're trying to find product fit. So the timing has completely changed. And right now, we're going through this journey right now. And people that don't get that are usually on the wrong side of what I mentioned, the top 5 in any of the categories.
I look in particular over the last decade, in particular of the evolution of the service providers within the category, and we've had a conglomeration from 2 ends. We had the traditional integrators that were being engaged by the sellers, by the technology vendors after they'd closed the deal. They'd bring in a bunch of SI partners and essentially say, "We've just sold this deal. You figure out, you pitch your integration capability." And then you had the agencies that were doing creative, that were essentially had a elite status with the client because they were creating the brand image. So there was a level of a trust and a relationship there with the clients, particularly chief digital officers and chief marketing officers, that they really trusted the agencies a great deal more with their image. And they've coalesced. There's been acquisitions both ways, and now the agencies are providing end-to-end guidance to those clients of here's who you are and here's how you should be selling to your customer. How has that changed the role of, and I'm talking about the major digital agencies now. I'm talking about the PFS and the Deloittes of the world. How has that changed their position within the alliance world, and you as a software vendor, how and when you should engage them?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll give you some statistics. There's 200,000 digital agencies out there that have employees. There's hundreds of thousands more that are single, people, Soho out there. But in those firms, 76% of them are now tech companies, tech services companies, implementations, integrations, compliance, security, continuity, data, automation. I mean, they literally look like a tech company. If you read their websites now, you got to go to page 4 of their website to find out. They'll do a brochure and some creative and concierge work for you as well. So this is just one of the big changes. But on the integration side, SIs, an Accenture, for example, now has 700,000 people. They're the largest tech company by employee size. The majority of their acquisitions, by the way, over the last year have been digital agencies. And people are scratching their heads going, why would you be doing that? Well, guess who spends more on technology than the CIO is the head of marketing, who has for 100 years owned the relationship with the head of marketing, the CMO, the agency. And so it's a match made in heaven. And if you think that integrators come in after the point of sale and they're ready to put all the pieces together, you haven't seen the Accentures and the Deloittes and the PwCs and the Capgemini, the top 20. You haven't seen them recently. They are building out ebooks. They're speaking in Vegas. They're on the boards of associations. They're in your first 28 moments. They're the ones guiding your customer. They're pretty much neutral. They're not going to represent you like a reseller would. But for them getting you into that 5 or 6 layer stack, they're hugely influential. And when you do the work and put logos on the page and put people on the top 100 list, you're going to see global system integrators, you're going to see regional system integrators, and you're going to see digital agencies, the large ones, be highly influential at the point of influence, in those 28 moments. They're going to be influential as the money changes hands. They even provide procurement services. In 24% of marketplace transactions today in B2B, it's a third party coming in on behalf of the customer and pressing buy on their behalf. Guess who's doing that? The agency or the integrator. And then now, guess who's out there every 30 days with your customer forever, getting you a customer for life? If you talk about those three stages, getting them to the dance, getting them on the dance floor, and getting them dancing all night long, if you're not looking up and down through integration firms and agencies, along with, by the way, a half a dozen others, there's a big Venn diagram over my shoulder,
Mhm.
this is part of day one business case. And if you're coming to me as a VC, an angel, or a PE firm, and you haven't got that as a page in your pitch deck, I'm going to stop the meeting. I'm going to send you back home to do the work that you should have brought into me, on that one PowerPoint slide.
Outstanding. Well, I guess I wouldn't be doing a service to my clients unless I talked about RevOps at some point here, because RevOps really plays a crucial role here, and in helping partners understand and you understand how you are valuing their contributions. And at an early stage, it's difficult to capture that. And I was wondering if you had any advice for early stage firms as they're standing up their alliances and partnerships for building out that functionality.
Yeah, it's getting better. One of the things I do in my spare time is I create that tech stack.
Mm-hmm.
So another thing over my shoulder, if you're watching on video, way up high, is a tech stack with 223 companies innovating in that area. They don't build e-commerce tools. They literally help you in those 28 moments. They're attribution companies. There are data sharing companies. So in the post-cookie world,
Mm-hmm.
there's companies trying to help you see those early 28 moments and generate data that you can use and get more of that early stage influence into MQLs, into your system. So that's a technology play now, knowing there's 7 partners, knowing there's 28 moments, and knowing the complexity there. We're bringing a lot of the consumer level Kim Kardashian attribution software now into B2B. And these companies are raising hundreds of millions of dollars to go hire the data scientists that can make that work. So again, we're early stages in the decade of the ecosystem, but it's 5 islands on this tech stack that I'm watching that help solve that problem. And across all 3 stages of your customer, and be able to monitor and measure and manage every moment that your customer goes through is now becoming a technology solution, because it's beyond what humans can do. And it's what humans can, do the machine learning and the predictive and prescriptive analytics to help you with partnerships at scale. And again, I would be pushing you early in your journey. You're not going to do resell maybe for 2 years. That's
Mm-hmm.
fine. I'm not going to build restaurants yet, but as you're designing your kitchen and building out that hamburger and the fries, as you're doing that, I would be investing, or at least running some pilots in terms of getting really smart about my customer and understanding how many partners are there. And my go-to-market strategy is literally an ecosystem partnership strategy, and completely disconnecting from that point of sale until I have the maturity and the product fit and the marketing and sales engine that's repeatable and scalable, to go do that later on with distributors and wholesale and marketplaces and everything else. I don't care about that yet. I care about my customer. And I got to build that tech stack on getting really good at what you just said in the RevOps area, now called FinOps, because it's a bigger, play here that is more than just sales and marketing. You bring out ecosystem ops, which is a bigger story. And the companies that get it right are, obviously doing very, very well.
Excellent. Well, I guess what I want to close with is, if I wasn't talking about marketing, and obviously you're marketing to your consumers, your end consumer, and you're marketing to your partners, and then you're marketing with your partners. So 3 different sets of campaigns and activities necessitated within this marketplace. Uh, where do you start? And what's the most appropriate strategy for gaining partners and traction with them from a marketing perspective? Or is it really not about marketing to your partners? It's really just about marketing with your partners.
No, there's 3. It's marketing to, through, and with your partners. The category up on my tech stack is through channel marketing automation.
Mm-hmm.
There's 40 companies that do this at scale. It's not the HubSpots and Marketos. When you get into the partnership world, there's a layer above that, which is a multi-tenant marketing automation tool that I can deploy email and social and search and syndicated content at scale across thousands of partners at once. So it's like having 1,000 instances of HubSpot that I can manage at that level. And all those companies I just mentioned on the marketing automation also use these TCMA tools for their own partnership channels. So TCMA is one area where you can use a central platform and your branding guidelines and your colors and your pixels and stuff, you can keep control a little bit of the marketing and it can run on your platform. So when the customer clicks on that ebook, you actually get visibility to it instantly because it's on your platform, as well as the partner gets access to that. And that partner is working on the deal now because you can attribute that right directly. But most of the activity is going to happen with, let's say, their marketing platform, which you don't own a piece of, and you're not spending market development funds to drive and things like that. So this is a new category called data sharing, to say that your partner may upload those clicks or upload those early partner opportunities before their MQLs if there is a reasonable expectation that the data is safe. They're not going to send it to you, but they can send it into a generic escrow service. And there's companies today like Crossbeam, Reveal, Pronto, PartnerTap that are raising hundreds of millions of dollars in this world that I'm going to send that early data up into a system. The vendors are going to be sending their data into the system, and there's account mapping at scale. There's marketing mapping at scale. And those 28 moments when something comes together that seems to be a really solid fit, then the marketing and sales team get this connection point, this point of collaboration, partner to partner. And this is a future. So when you don't own the marketing through TCMA, you now own at least those early data points that you can trigger some of you. And every entrepreneur knows the earlier you get into a deal, the higher your chances of winning.
Well, Jay, I really appreciate all of your responses. I'm sure they're going to be extremely valuable for all those founders out there that are planning out their channel partner strategies. And I guess our watchwords for today are early and often, and uh, don't don't leave them out at any point in the process. But thanks again for your time and for your contribution. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
All right. Have a great day. Thanks for listening to Martalks. Please leave a review and a rating on your platform of choice. We're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all major podcast platforms. To find out more about how the Rosenstein Group can help you find the right leaders for your client development teams in MarTech and e-commerce, please visit our website, rosensteingroup.com.